Hey, everybody. Welcome. Come on in. Getting the technology right. Glad to be together. The beginning of there. Sorry about that. I didn't have the mute off. I'm in a hotel room again, still undisclosed location. I'll tell you about that later. But I wanted to make sure to follow up Todd Bensman. Hi, Aaron. How are you? Todd Bensman is over at the Center for Immigration Studies. He's got another piece up. The news, the fake news, is just catching up to us, what we've been talking about for a few days in terms of the immigration problem and the terror threat. So you want to check that. Hey, there's Mary Alice from California. Glad you're here, Mary Alice. Thank you for joining. And we got a whole bunch of folks over on Facebook Live. So thank you for that. Please feel free to share this with other folks. Now, so Todd Bensman, CIS.org. Check it out. He's got a new piece up. Hi, Danielle. Hey, Aaron. I'm doing well. Thank you. We're doing great. Lots to talk about. Okay, let me do this and switch these captions here, because this will give you the theme for today in this time together. What you now know when we're done with this. Let me tell you a little context. I was driving with my daughter, who's a junior in high school, and she was listening to AP US History course, podcast. And I listened as I forget now which comment. And I thought, you know what? Why wouldn't there be fake history? We get fake news every day from the establishment, folks that have said that they're into the news. They said that they're the people that are going to give us what, is the news. And we see it now as totally fake news. And once you realize it's fake news, we don't have a credible news industry. Our freedom of press is limited to people who are serious getting out into the spaces that allow them the freedom to actually communicate like we're doing and not have to be governed by either Fox News's board of directors, which hates Trump, in my opinion, or CNN's board of directors, or CNN's a top guy who hates Trump. I mean, think about this. We're at the mercy. We've got some other outlets. Newsmax is cool. OANN is great, but they're small comparatively, and we have to fight through anyway. So my realization is, again, reinforced about fake history. Because think about how fake history is and how they write it. And we're living in the fake news, the narrative machine, trying to tell us what happened in 2020 in a way that in 10 years, they'll do an AP US history course and they'll say, in 2020, there was a great election and there was no widespread evidence of fraud. And people that were crazy complained about that, including Donald Trump and others. And it led to this crazy insurrection because they've used all the words repeatedly. They've used all the words repeatedly. I forget now the example. There was one example that was just outrageous. Oh, the Red Scare. They cover the Red Scare, the McCarthy era, and they basically say McCarthy, they went so far as in this AP US History blog to say that Alger Hiss was convicted of perjury, but he didn't really do anything else. He just convicted of perjury. Well, that may be true. He was only convicted of perjury, but we know now, especially in the last 20 years, as the Soviet empire fell, and then we saw what was behind the curtain in terms of the records. Alger Hiss was a full-blown spy. He was doing what they were accusing him of, and yet they cover McCarthy as if he was wrong. He may have been a wild character in certain ways, although most of that was a caricature of an Irish guy who had a drinking problem, which, they didn't do that to Ted Kennedy. They just made it sort of funny. Ha, ha, ha. Kennedy and Chris Dodd assaulting women all across D.C., according to one of the main articles written on New Yorker or somebody, Esquire, 10, 15, 20 years ago. But McCarthy got vilified for his personal problems, be that as it may. But what he said... And Stan Evans wrote a book about this, and Paul Kengor over at Grove City College writes about it. McCarthy was proven right, and yet the history is being written in a way that McCarthyism, it means that it was totally false. I'll stop. We have a problem of fake history as well as fake news, which brings me to today. I read this new website that Jonah Goldberg started last year before. It's called The Dispatch. And I try to read it to see what people are thinking in the sort of never Trump world of Republicans who think they're conservative, but they're really just establishment folks. They're really echoing the past. They're literally echoing Buckley, echoing, the past, the failures, not the good stuff, not the good things that Buckley did, but the failures, his globalism, his sellout, the way they sold out and that whole industry to big money. Anyway, Jonah Goldberg's got this website or this, maybe it's a Twitter service called The Dispatch. And they published an article, which I'll post up on social media, but it's basically a defense of how they say the American people don't really want to go back to school in person. And this author cites all this data of a couple of surveys done by obviously teachers union friendly folks, and more importantly, narrative machine friendly folks. The narrative is the pandemic is the worst thing ever. Therefore, we have to stay afraid, stay afraid, stay afraid. That's the narrative, right? That's the narrative. I'm not, by the way, I'm not denying there's a pandemic. What I'm saying is the narrative has been fear, fear, fear. It's been very effective at making people fearful and making some people crazy. So this dispatch, which is supposed to be more about politics using data or something like that, but this website has has this article. It's all about polling that purports to say that the American people, by and large, are really happy with the closed down schools because they feel like that's what we have to do, and they really don't even worry about going back to in school. And here's the great thing on this site. I looked at the comments, which I very rarely do. And here's one of the early comments. And this is a guy, I won't say his name because you could see it on the website, but he says, I respectfully find the publication of this piece bizarre. He goes on and he says, if you tell people that open schools will kill teachers, kids, grandparents, and that refusing to accept this overwhelming evidence that kids in society are better off with kids at school, in other words, you have to refuse that, surveys will reflect this. That's my point. Remember what the narrative machine is doing to us? This guy, a conservative website, a so-called conservative, is saying, oh, the people really like to shut down schools. And he's relying on data. But I bet you some people do say we have to keep our kids out of school. A whole bunch of liberals, if you watch CNN, you probably think you got to keep your kids out of school for years. They're brainwashed. There's no data that shows that kids are spreaders or kids get really sick. Very, very low. In fact, the kids get really sick are obese kids and high comorbidity kids. Hard to say that, but that's true. But here's my point. He even in this essay uses the word the narrative. The narrative about the teachers' unions, this author says, is really too harsh, that the American people really accept what's going on. I'm just warning you, what I said right here, the narrative machine is yielding fake news every day. It's yielding the fake narrative every day in all these ways. And it yields to fake history. It yields to fake science. It yields to fake polling. This is what this is. It's fake polling. It's polling that's done after the media has spent billions and billions of earned media hours telling you to be afraid of schools, telling you to be afraid of killing your grandma. How many times have you heard that? That kids can take home the disease to grandma. Now, look, if it's a multi-generational household, then that's real. But if it's just a matter right now, grandma's not seeing the kids anyway because everybody's being careful or hasn't been. So it's an incredibly powerful narrative machine that's going on. It is really, really driving all of us crazy. And what is not acknowledged is how common the narrative machine is making people unhealthy. And also not acknowledged is how often so-called conservatives play along with the narrative. You know why? Because it's easier. It's much more acceptable in the salons of power, in the salons of influence, to have this nuanced opinion that, oh, the teachers' unions are really not that good, but they're right about needing to stay home. That's a nuance. Oh, wow, that's not thoughtful. That's a thoughtful conservative position. Way to go, Jonah Goldberg's The Dispatch. That's really helpful. No, it's helpful if you want to be invited to be on panel discussions at the U.S. Congress or at Georgetown University, or go up to Harvard and be at the Kennedy School and get a nice position. That's how you do it. That's the way you do it. If you do it like this, watch this. And I guarantee you, won't be invited to the Kennedy School at Harvard, won't be invited on a panel at Georgetown, partly because they don't like my position, but partly because they know I know how to argue. But here's what the truth is. This is nonsense. The American people are absolutely beside themselves to get back to school. And they don't understand why they're being thrown all these kinds of facts and fears, and they're confused by it. That might be a better thing to say. Many Americans are confused by what they feel and see is the truth, and what they're being fed and told is the truth. And the fed and told, the problem with it, the fed and told, but they're being fed by the fake news, what they're being told by the big government, that is more powerful. It's being done so well. I mean this as a compliment of the evil that's happening. The ability of big government, big news, big media, and big tech to tell us something that they say we must believe is true. In the past, when we hit a certain point and we said, wait, my gut feels like I understand this differently. Like imagine that there's a good one. Most Americans realized that when there was a movement for rampant sex ed, saying that sex ed had to be everywhere, promiscuity everywhere, the gut people said, hey, this isn't comporting with what I know. And then they had backup from their faith communities, from their families, and they stood up to that truth and they didn't fall for the truth. Right now, too many Americans are being inundated by the fake news, by big tech, by big government, and told how to feel and told what is true. And it's overwhelming us. And only some of us, you're on here and other places, are getting ourselves together and saying, hey, how do we hold off what's happening? It's happening all around us. In the past, it was your friend who came and told you Trump was Hitler. And you said, Trump is Hitler? You're not watching the Supreme Court strike down Trump. You're not watching the Congress check Trump. You're not watching the Republican Party check President Trump. And those people, you'd say, those people have been brainwashed to think that Trump is Hitler. That's a little weird. That's a little scary. That's a little unsettling. How do I break that spell? How do I tell them the Russia hoax was a hoax? How do I tell them the Fine People hoax was a hoax? How do you work that out? But what's happening now is the larger society now is being overrun by the narrative machine. Conservatives, so-called conservatives, are helping. And so back to what we can do. We have to, you have to, I have to return to the core. For me, I hope for you, Scripture. And then the basics of our founding, get our solidity, get solid in what's happening, right? In our roots, hold our roots. You have to find that if it's only a small community, your family or a faith community, whatever it is, hold your roots. And then you have to be willing to stand up and say, hey, what's going on with other communities of believers? And you have to cut through it. And I can tell you, when Jonah Goldberg's The Dispatch publishes this junk, it's meant to pull the conservatives who don't know better. They go, oh my gosh, they've said 27 bad things about Biden. I agree with all of them. And now they're telling me this about the teachers unions. And you say, what is that? That's part of the narrative machine. It's very, very dangerous time. So stand up, be aware, right? Be awake. I hate to say it. Be woke. Be woke to the fake history, to the fake news, to big government, and understand what the narrative machine's doing. And make sure, sign up, by the way, I'll put it back up. Follow me on Twitter, follow me on Facebook, Ed Martin Live. But go over to proamericareport.com right now and sign up for our daily email. Every morning, 8 a.m. East Coast time, bam, almost 80,000 people get this WYNK. It's called What You Now Know. In your inbox, you'll see a couple of links, couple of points, and you'll be started your day well. So I just wanted to point out the narrative machine. It's doing fake history as well as fake news, but we got to fight back. So thanks, everybody. We'll talk again soon.